Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. Over at the Queen residence, Jonathan had spent almost the entire day carefully crafting a plan to spark public criticism. He had even exposed Herbscape Group's past misdeeds. Once Herbscape Group's reputation is ruined, I doubt the Damaris family will still dare to take the risk and collaborate with them. After the Damaris family cuts ties with Herbscape Group, the latter can only come crawling back to Farwell Group, and it'll be much easier for us to acquire Herbscape Group. With that goal in mind, Jonathan had been monitoring the online sentiment practically the whole day. He kept a close eye on it until late into the night and could not help feeling somewhat disappointed when he saw that the public outcry still had yet to turn out as he expected. I wanted all of Horrington to be aware of these things Herbscape Group has done. That way, Damaris Group would have no choice but to call off their plans to collaborate with Herbscape Group to avoid getting caught up in a messy situation. After going through the comments online, Jonathan made a call with a frown. On the other end of the line, a male voice asked respectfully, "Do you have any other instructions, Mr. Queen? Is that all you managed to dig up on Herbscape Group?" Jonathan demanded coldly. The man quickly answered in the negative. We still have plenty of dirt on them. It's just that when considering how to deliver a blow that can cause the most damage to Herbscape Group, I thought of releasing the information little by little. You see. Jonathan fell silent for a moment before cutting in and asking, "What other information do you have on them? Send them over for me to take a look." The person on the other end of the line immediately agreed to do so. Shortly after, he sent a slew of evidence on Herbscape Group selling counterfeit drugs and smuggling drugs to Jonathan's phone. Jonathan narrowed his eyes coldly, then instructed in an icy voice, "Release all of it. Don't give Herbscape Group any breathing room." What happened today must have given Herbscape Group a good jolt. If we hold on to the information, they'll probably have thought of a way to weasel out this scot-free by the time the morning rolls around. By then, even if we release the information, it'll only backfire and turn into a weapon for Herbscape Group to get back at us. After Jonathan's reminder, the person on the other end of the line realized the risk and quickly promised to follow Jonathan's instructions. Not long after the call ended, a barrage of damaging information on Herbscape Group broke out on the internet, and the online discussions grew even more heated. The stream of shocking revelations stirred a severe distrust toward Herbscape Group among some netizens, who demanded the company compensate them for psychological damages. On the other hand, others still wanted to give Herbscape Group a chance and urged the company to issue a statement. Jonathan was amused as he read the comments imploring Herbscape Group to give an explanation. Herbscape Group is probably at their wits' end by now, trying to think of a way to turn the tables. How will they have the time to read these online comments? Even if they do, they won't be able to present any solid evidence to refute all this. They'd only be asking for a castigation if they stepped out to say something. While he was gloating over the fruits of his labor, his phone suddenly rang, and his phone screen lit up to show that Lucian was calling him. For him to call me at such an hour probably means he has seen the chaos I created. However, I've no idea what he'll think about what I did. As those thoughts ran through his mind, Jonathan tamped down his self-satisfaction and answered the call. "What's up, Lucian?" Over on the other end of the line, Lucian continued reading the comments online while on the phone. When he saw that another wave of scandalous details had broken out on the internet, a mocking look glinted in his eyes. Roxan has always been proud of being a doctor and takes medical ethics very seriously. I wonder what she'll think if she finds out the company she's working with has done so many unlawful things behind her back. Lucian's end of the line was so silent that his breathing was clearly audible. "Lucian?" Puzzled at not getting any response even after waiting for a while, Jonathan called out Lucian's name. He started feeling tensed, thinking that his actions had drawn Lucian's displeasure. There was another long pause before a low voice said, "You're responsible for the online furor I'm seeing, aren't you?" Lucian's tone was impassive. Jonathan pondered for several seconds before admitting frankly, "That was the easiest and quickest method that came to my mind. As long as Herbscape Group's reputation gets dragged through the mud, they may even end up approaching us, begging for an acquisition." That response is not in keeping with Jonathan's usually free and easy demeanor, yet it's unsurprising. He has put in a lot of effort to get to where he is today and helped his family gain a solid footing in Horrington's business world. Apart from Damaris Group, they're the only other family that's so powerful. To become a successful businessperson, resorting to despicable means is sometimes necessary. Lucian frowned slightly after hearing Jonathan admit to it. A strange feeling flitted across his heart, and his thoughts inadvertently turned to Roxan. Even though I want to teach her a lesson, this seems like a big mess that could send all the earlier effort she put into being part of this project down the drain. In the end, Lucian was still hesitant. He simply could not bring himself to be cruel to her. Meanwhile, uneasiness gradually rose in Jonathan's heart. Are you thinking that my methods are a little deplorable? After all, I'm working for Farwell Group now, and Herbscape Group will have to rely on us in the future. For Farwell Group, such underhanded methods are shameful indeed. He felt a pang of regret as the realization dawned on him. If you think it's inappropriate, I can ask them to take down the discussions at once. I promise that all the damaging information online will also be completely removed. Snapping out of his thoughts, Lucian pinched the space between his brows. In the end, he steeled his heart and said, "There's no need for that. You did very well." Jonathan was flabbergasted upon hearing Lucian's response. Then what? If he really does think I did well, what was he thinking about for so long? Jonathan's brows furrowed as he contemplated the matter for a few seconds. Then he ventured a guess. Is it because of Dr. Jarvis? The only person Jonathan could think of who could make Lucian change his mind was Roxan. However, Lucian continued talking as though he had not heard Jonathan's question. It's just how the business world works. Since Herbscape Group was the one who committed a breach of contract first, they deserve to be taught a lesson. Lucian's gaze darkened after he said that. His words were not merely meant to refer to Herbscape Group but also to persuade himself. Since Roxanne doesn't know how to keep her distance from other men, I must be the one to give her a wake-up call. Although Lucian did not say anything, Jonathan still managed to guess what the former was thinking. He also knew Lucian did not want to talk about it. Hence he followed the latter's lead and changed the subject. If that's the case, great. And here I was thinking you wouldn't be able to accept my way of doing things. Lucian smiled faintly, appearing unconcerned. It's just a bit of fun. Like I said before, as long as Herbscape Group falls, I don't care what it takes. Besides, it's not like I've never used worse methods. After hearing Lucian's response, Jonathan finally felt at ease. Meanwhile, at the Damaris residence, Jack was leaving the study after his conversation with Hector. On his way back to his room, the butler suddenly approached him with his phone. "Mr. Damaris, a call for you." Half an hour earlier, Jack's phone had been ringing off the hook. However, the butler dared not answer the phone on his behalf while Jack was still discussing matters with his grandfather in the study. He ended up waiting at the stairwell until Jack left the study. Jack acknowledged the butler's message with a nod and furrowed his brows slightly when he saw the caller ID. It was a call from Dean LaCroix, the CEO of Herbscape Group. "Why is he calling me at such a late hour?" The butler explained helpfully, "He's been calling you non-stop for half an hour." Jack's heart sank. He answered the call with a frown. Before he could utter a word, Dean's panicked voice drifted through the receiver. Mr. Damaris, thank goodness you've answered your phone. Herbscape Group is in trouble. Please help us. You're the only person I can think of right now. If Dean had known the Damaris residence's address, he would have knocked down their door in the middle of the night after failing to contact Jack for half an hour. Puzzlement flitted across Jack's gaze as he asked, "What happened?" He had been talking to Hector in the study the whole time and was blissfully unaware of the disaster that had unfolded on the internet. Dean was in disbelief at Jack's complete ignorance of the matter. Nonetheless, he did not have the luxury to explain everything to Jack. Someone published Herbscape Group's past scandals on the internet and it's going viral. I've received word from both the State Taxation Administration and International Trade Administration. They're sending men over to investigate my company. He then made a plea for help. Someone must be attacking our company, but I can't think of a potential culprit. The best thing I can do right now is ask you for help. Jack's frown deepened when he heard of the State Taxation Administration's and International Trade Administration's involvement. He had chosen to collaborate with Herbscape Group because of their scale of operation in Horrington. As for the company's background, he had arranged for rather extensive investigations and concluded that their scandalous past was well buried. He would not have worked with them otherwise. To his surprise, Herbscape Group was now embroiled in a massive scandal. Dean's anxiety ballooned at Jack's prolonged silence. He was covered in a cold sweat as he pleaded, "Mr. Damaris, I'm only doing this for both our benefits. We're still collaborators and Herbscape Group is responsible for supplying medicinal herbs for the Damaris family's new project. If something happens to us, your project will surely be in hot soup. We're in the same boat here." He was clearly worried out of his mind, considering the veiled threat in his plea. Jack narrowed his gaze in displeasure and replied coldly, "Got it. I'll think of what to do after forming a better understanding of the situation." Then he hung up without giving Dean a chance to respond. Dean realized belatedly he had said something wrong when he heard the call-end tone. Regret tinged his features. If I've offended Jack earlier and ruined our chances of getting his help, I'll need to crawl back to Farwell Group for help. Dean regretted his decision to break off his contract with Farwell Group more than ever. Despite Farwell Group's excellent terms, he had backed out of the contract at the last minute. If he went back to them for help now, he would have no grounds to renegotiate a decent deal. In fact, with Herbscape Group's tainted reputation, Farwell Group could very well refuse to acquire them. After ending his call with Dean, Jack Googled Herbscape Group and was swamped with news headlines about the company. Jack read every article carefully, realizing that every post was published that day. The person behind the exposé clearly did not wish to give Herbscape Group any room to breathe. Jack raised his brows in surprise as he read the news online. He had to admit that the person who uncovered Herbscape Group's scandalous past was a brilliant mastermind. Only a skilled hacker could dig out the company's well-hidden scandals. The discovery significantly narrowed his circle of suspects. There were few people in Horrington who were this talented and had a history with Herbscape Group. Jack could only think of one person, Lucian. Still, Damaris Group and Herbscape Group had formalized their collaboration a long time ago. It seemed a little late to be exacting revenge now. What is he playing at? Jack narrowed his eyes in thought. Just then, Dean called him again. He was evidently anxious over Jack's decision. Jack snapped out of his thoughts and nonchalantly picked up the call. Once the line connected, Dean asked hastily, "Mr. Damaris, what do you think? Herbscape Group can't afford to wait any longer." Dean had mulled over his options and decided to crawl back to Farwell Group for mercy if Jack refused to lend a helping hand. He would throw all his pride out the window and beg Farwell Group if necessary. Jack sounded calmer than ever as he replied, "Don't worry about it. Damaris Group has chosen to collaborate with Herbscape Group, and we won't leave you to fend for yourselves in times of trouble." Despite his reassurance, Dean's concern was palpable as he asked, "Really? How can I help?" asked Jack in return. After humming and hawing for a while, Dean replied, "Well, I hope Damaris Group can lend us some funds to stabilize Herbscape Group's share price as soon as possible." If their share price continued its free fall, Herbscape Group would have to declare bankruptcy the next day, even without the State Taxation Administration's and International Trade Administration's investigation. Jack frowned and asked, "How much are you asking?" Dean cautiously reported a number, $1.2 billion. Then he waited for Jack's response with his heart in his throat. That was a massive sum even for Damaris Group, especially because it was going to a company they had just collaborated with. Dean would not be surprised at all if Jack refused his request. There would only be two possible outcomes then: bankruptcy, or a plea to Farwell Group to acquire them at a dirt cheap offer. Neither was an option he preferred. Jack's expression darkened slightly when he heard Dean's request. He mulled over the sum. $1.2 billion was a fortune, but Damaris Group could still afford it. However, that did not mean it was worth it for a company like Herbscape Group. Under normal circumstances, Jack would have terminated the contract with Herbscape Group without further thought. They could pay up the penalty, which would cost far less than what Dean was asking for right now. However, considering that Lucian could be behind Herbscape Group's scandal, Jack was more inclined to go against his usual instinct. If Lucian wants to throw a wrench in our plans, why should I let him win so easily? With that thought in mind, Jack agreed to Dean's request. All right. Give me some time." He hung up on Dean again. Jack's expression darkened further after he briefed his assistant on how they would help Herbscape Group. He had easily snapped up the collaboration with Herbscape Group thanks to Lucian. Yet now he was paying a hefty price to keep the collaboration and his company's project alive. Lucian would laugh his head off if he knew about this. Something niggled at Jack's mind. Why would Lucian pull a stunt like this now? He didn't have to wait this long to punish Herbscape Group for pulling out of their deal. Farwell Group is powerful enough to leak such a scandal way before Herbscape Group signed their deal with us. Jack failed to think of another reason for what seemed like a belated revenge. His phone lit up with another call as he frowned over the issue. Jack glanced at the screen and was surprised when he saw the caller ID. He answered the call immediately. "Miss Jarvis, why are you calling me at such a late hour?" Roxanne appeared conflicted as she asked, "Have you seen the news about Herbscape Group, Mr. Damaris?" Jack replied in the affirmative. "Mr. LaCroix called me about it earlier. I've agreed to help them." His response stunned Roxanne. If she were in Jack's shoes, she would have cut ties with Herbscape Group immediately so that their scandals would not affect the company's future projects. Plus, if Herbscape Group had a history of unlawful practices, it would be difficult to guarantee that they would not do the same while supplying medicinal herbs in the project. Jack seemed to have sensed her concerns. He reassured her, "We don't even know if the news on the internet is real or fake. Since we've decided to work with Herbscape Group, we have to believe them. Even if the scandals are true, I'm sure they won't dare to betray us when they remember how I've helped them today." Nonetheless, Roxanne remained hesitant. Herbscape Group's past actions did not sit well with her medical ethics. She considered the topic from another angle. Jack was not only the heir to a family with a prestigious background in medicine, but also a businessman. It was understandable that he prioritized profits in any of his dealings. By extension, Roxanne would have to respect Jack's wishes as a willing participant in his project. As that thought crossed her mind, Roxanne suppressed her discomfort and replied, That would be the best. That's all I wanted to call you about. I have nothing else to add since you already know the situation. Let me know if I can help you with anything, Mr. Damaris." Jack expressed his gratitude at her offer. Well,
"Thank you in advance, then, Miss Jarvis." They promptly ended their call. Jack's phone screen turned black once more, reflecting the grimness in his gaze. Roxanne's phone call reminded him that she was potentially involved in Farwell Group and Herbscape Group's conflict. Not long ago, Roxanne had agreed to be Herbscape Group's technical advisor, and the scandals broke out shortly after that. It seemed far more likely that Lucian's actions had been triggered by Roxanne than an act of delayed revenge on Herbscape Group. All for a woman. I can't believe this could happen to someone like Lucian Farwell. Jack scoffed at the irony of the situation. If his hypothesis was true, he would gladly take Roxanne up on her offer to help.
Lucian woke up later than usual the next morning, having spent the night before following online discussions of Herbscape Group's scandals. When he opened his room door, he was instantly greeted by the sight of a furious little girl. He knew Estella was angry at him because he did not check in on her after getting home last night. Lucian frowned, but he hid his frustration well. She was his child after all, and he was not about to ignore her. He pretended not to notice her fury as he asked, "Essie, why are you looking for me so early in the morning?" Estella looked up at her father and said grumpily, "Daddy's a meanie. Daddy doesn't care about me at all." Lucian's brows arched in surprise. He did not expect his daughter to arrive at such a conclusion. "Why would you say that?" he asked calmly despite knowing the reason behind her petulance. Estella puffed up her cheeks in anger, but it soon deflated into sadness as she whined, "Miss Catalina said you came home last night." She had already been upset at herself for falling asleep before her father returned home. She had thought Lucian would visit her once he arrived home, but no one woke her up. In fact, when she got up that morning, she had thought her father had been out the whole night and felt sorry for him. Estella then headed downstairs, where to her dismay, Catalina revealed that Lucian had come home the night before. Her sympathy instantly morphed into anger, and she stalked back upstairs, waiting outside Lucian's bedroom to interrogate him. Lucian knew Estella would burst into angry tears if he continued playing dumb. He knitted his brows resignedly and bent down to stroke his daughter's hair. "I was too tired last night, so I went straight to my room to rest instead of checking on you." Estella scrutinized his face for a long time. Convinced that he was not lying, Estella gradually let go of her anger. She tugged on his shirt and wailed, "But Daddy, I wanted to tell you something last night." Lucian sighed to himself. It was impossible to evade the topic that Estella pointedly wished to discuss. He would have entertained her advice before knowing about Jonathan's actions. Now, however, he was doing something that could make Roxanne's life difficult, and he was worried he would regret his actions after hearing Estella sing her mother's praises. Lucian removed Estella's hand from his shirt and ruffled her hair, coaxing, "I have to rush to the office. Can we talk about this after I get back from work?" Before she could react, Lucian straightened himself and walked around his daughter. Estella realized belatedly that Lucian had escaped her sight. She hastily chased after him and whined, "But I won't take up a lot of time. Wait for me, Daddy." Lucian frowned but resolutely ignored her pleas. Meanwhile, Catalina watched them coming downstairs and was perturbed at how unmoved Lucian seemed despite Estella's anxious expression. She guessed the reason behind the young girl's distress and said carefully, "Mr. Farwell, Ms. Estella was asking about." Her words abruptly cut off when she noticed Estella almost tumbling down the stairs in her haste to reach her father. "Ms. Estella!" Catalina shrieked while racing toward the girl. A moment of silence descended upon the room. When Lucian saw Catalina's expression, he instinctively turned around. His heart skipped when he saw the state Estella was in. He swiftly reached out and caught Estella. "Be careful." At the sight of Lucian holding Estella, Catalina heaved a sigh of relief. Although Estella was only a few steps away from the floor, she was small and fragile. It would be dangerous if she were to fall. Estella had been in a hurry to chase Lucian that she did not watch her steps. The moment she missed her footing, she was so terrified that she couldn't make a sound at all. Although Lucian had caught her in time, she only felt more and more aggrieved. Why didn't Daddy wait for me? At that thought, Estella looked up at Lucian with a pout and grumbled, I couldn't keep up with you because you were walking too fast. Lucian furrowed his brows. He knew that Estella was blaming him for her almost accident. Meeting her eyes, he said helplessly, Essie, I told you that I'm really busy these days. I never knew she was such a stubborn little girl. She's doing this because she wants to speak up for Roxan. Estella looked even more upset when she heard Lucian. I almost tripped, but it seems that Daddy doesn't plan to listen to what I have to say. If this drags on, when will Daddy and Miss Jarvis be together? Faced with Estella's pitiful countenance, Lucian sighed inwardly. He just couldn't help but give in to her. Okay, I'll listen to you, but we only have 3 minutes. I have to leave after 3 minutes. Immediately Estella's eyes lit up. She bobbed her head obediently and asked, Were you angry at Miss Jarvis last night? Lucian nodded. His fury was written all over his face the night before. Even if he denied it, Estella probably wouldn't believe him. Puffing her cheeks, Estella said adorably, Daddy, can you forgive Miss Jarvis? She already apologized to me last night. Lucian raised his brow at that. What kind of logic is that? Why do I have to forgive Roxan just because she apologized to Essie? Indeed, Lucian was mad because of how Roxan treated Estella. However, her attitude toward him was also one of the reasons for his anger. Estella refused to give up. She continued seriously, Miss Jarvis already knows that she was wrong. If you still don't forgive her, I will be sad. Left with no choice, Lucian scrunched his eyebrows and said, All right, I'll forgive her. He figured Estella wouldn't let him go if he didn't give in that day. Even after hearing his words, Estella stared at him doubtfully for a while. Lucian did not give her time to speak. He put her down on the floor and said, Time's up. I have to go to work now. Stay at home and be good. Noticing that he was just trying to get this over with, Estella felt a bit agitated. She wanted to stop him, but Lucian stroked her head and turned around right away. Before leaving, he did not forget to remind Catalina to take good care of Estella.
Due to the sudden scandal about Herbscape Group, Jack had spent the whole night thinking. In the end, he decided that since he had sacrificed so much, he had to drag Lucian down with him. Early the next morning, Jack drove to Roxanne's house. Roxanne was eating breakfast with Archie and Benny when the doorbell rang. She couldn't help but wonder who it was. When she saw the person standing at the door, she was surprised. Mr. Damaris, what brings you here so early in the morning? Did anything happen to Herbscape Group again? As she spoke, she looked at Jack in confusion and stepped aside to let him in. Jack nodded firmly, looking solemn. I spent a lot of money yesterday and helped stabilize their stock prices, but this morning, Herbscape Group was ordered to stop its operation. All of its projects and activities will have to be postponed from now on. This meant that if they carried on with their project, Herbscape Group would likely be unable to supply them with medicines on time. As a result, the money Jack spent would also go to waste. When Roxanne realized that, she said worriedly, Then our project. And it will also have to be postponed. Jack rubbed his temples and casually mentioned, I wonder who Herbscape Group offended. Upon hearing that, Roxanne thought of her speculation the day before. Guilt filled her as she took in Jack's distressed appearance. In an attempt to change the topic, she cleared her throat and said, Does this mean Damaris Group's efforts all this time will be in vain? It must be a huge loss. Jack's frown deepened as he remarked, The money I spent yesterday alone was a huge figure. I originally planned to temporarily stabilize Herbscape Group's situation with that money, but I didn't expect the officials to act so quickly. If there's nothing serious, Herbscape Group will probably be able to resume its operations after the investigation today, right? It's just that it will need some time to repair its reputation, Roxanne commented, looking uneasy. The next second, she heard Jack chuckle helplessly. Oh, it's not that easy. Roxanne knitted her brows in puzzlement and looked at him. Jack shrugged. Seeing how the person behind this can ruin Herbscape Group's reputation in one day and how the officials treat this matter so seriously, I believe that person must have a powerful background. If that person doesn't want to go easy on Herbscape Group, then nothing good will come out of the investigation today. In short, Herbscape Group had no control over its fate. It was at the mercy of that person behind the scene. Even if Herbscape Group were really innocent, it would be found guilty if that person said so. Roxanne had considered the possibility of Lucian being the person behind the scene, but she had never thought so deeply about the matter. With Jack's reminder, Roxanne started to doubt the news and the evidence in the reports she had seen the day before. Did Herbscape Group really do those things, or is that what Lucian wants to make them out to be? What is Lucian trying to achieve by doing this? Roxanne and Jack talked while walking into the living room, then sat down on the couch. Roxanne's mind was filled with her speculations about Lucian that she was in a daze for some time. When she finally came back to her senses, she stood up apologetically and hurriedly prepared a cup of coffee for Jack.
Jack accepted the cup of coffee from Roxanne and said politely thanks. Roxanne sat down beside him on the couch and stared at him solemnly. What should I do now? A major incident had erupted at Herbscape Group. Yet Jack dropped by early in the morning to look for her. It meant that he needed her help. However, Jack responded with another question, "Do you have a suspect in mind?" Roxanne was stunned by his question. In fact, she had a suspect in mind, but she did not know how to approach the subject. Subconsciously, she refused to believe that Lucian would do such a thing. A Mr. LaCroix of Herbscape Group told me that he suspects Farwell Group is behind the incident. Jack fabricated Dean's words expressionlessly. It's because Herbscape Group broke off the contract at the last minute, and as such, Farwell Group decided to take revenge on them. Roxanne frowned and kept quiet. Dean's suspicions were the same as hers. Jack glanced at her and continued, "In my opinion, that might not be the case." Roxanne was confused by his words. She thought Jack meant that Lucian might not be the mastermind. Mr. Damaris, you think?" Before she could finish, she noticed Jack staring at her with an inscrutable expression on his face. When she met his gaze, Roxanne fell silent and her heart sank. Jack spoke slowly. "I'm more inclined to think Mr. Farwell took action against Herbscape Group because of me." Roxanne was astonished. After a moment's silence, she asked, "Why do you say so? Is it because Damaris Group snatched Herbscape Group away from him previously?" Jack noticed the shift in Roxanne's expression and smiled wryly. "Ms. Jarvis, are you still going to play dumb with me after all we've been through?" Getting stared at by Jack made Roxanne feel guilty, but she did not know what he was getting at. Moreover, she had no idea how to answer him, so she merely gazed at him blankly. "I bet a smart person could tell how much Mr. Farwell cares about you." Jack smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Earlier, I also assumed that my dispute with Mr. Farwell was only business-related. However, after thinking about it last night, I thought of you." As soon as he finished speaking, Jack looked away mysteriously and took a sip of his coffee. On the contrary, Roxanne shuddered. "So, based on what Jack has told me, what Lucian did has something to do with me." However, just when Roxanne was still trying to convince herself that it was not because of her, Jack's voice sounded beside her ears again. He said, "It's true that of late we've become closer due to work. As such, I can't blame Mr. Farwell if he misunderstands our relationship." Jack feigned a calm grin. "And nonetheless, I now hold a grudge against Mr. Farwell as a result of this issue. After a while, Roxanne finally snapped back to her senses and forced a wan smile. "You must be mistaken, Mr. Damaris. My relationship with Mr. Farwell isn't what you think." She wanted to explain when she got interrupted by a strange, meaningful gleam in Jack's eyes. "Perhaps you're the only one who thinks that way," he said. Roxanne was stunned. For one moment she was almost convinced by Jack's gaze and tone. Does the incident at Herbscape Group really have something to do with me? Mommy. While Roxanne was still doubting herself, Archie and Benny's sweet voices could be heard. The boys had been waiting in the dining room for quite some time. When Roxanne did not return, they thought Lucian had arrived with Estella, so they ran outside excitedly. However, when they saw the man on the couch, the boys instantly became wary of him. Although Archie and Benny had only met Jack once, they had a lasting impression of that man. They were already worried that Jack would steal their mother away from their father. Furthermore, they knew their parents had a fight yesterday because of Jack. Since Jack had dropped by early in the morning to look for Roxanne, Archie and Benny couldn't help having their guard up. "Hello." Jack smiled at the boys and stood up. "I didn't prepare a gift for you when we met the last time. Hence, to be on the safe side, I stored a gift in my car so that I can hand it to you when I see you. Hang on, I'll get it." Then Jack left the mansion to get the gift. Once he was out, Archie and Benny huddled up to their mother and asked, "Mommy, why did Mr. Damaris drop by today?" Roxanne pushed her frustrations away and tried her best to force a smile at her children. "Nothing, it's just because of work." "Don't worry." "Work again." Archie and Benny glanced at each other. Yesterday Jack had also summoned Roxanne away using work as an excuse. As a result, Lucian and Roxanne argued over this matter. "Well, are you going to work today, Mommy?" The boys displayed pitiful expressions on purpose and murmured, "You promised you'd take us out today." Ever since her return, Roxanne would take her children outside almost every weekend to relax. Yesterday she had been summoned by Jack to give a tour of the research institute. As such, she had to reschedule her plans with her children for this day. A major incident had erupted at Herbscape Group the day before, and Roxanne was worried about it. Still, she did not want to disappoint her children and decided to go out with them as planned. However, she did not expect Jack to visit her early in the morning. At that point, she was not sure of the day's plans. Archie and Benny lowered their heads woefully when they did not receive a response from their mother. Seeing their looks of disappointment, Roxanne caressed their heads apologetically. "I'm sorry. If there isn't anything important, Mommy will try not to leave the house. Even if I do, I'll be back soon." "All right." The boys were still a bit reluctant about it. They refused to let their mother spend another minute with Jack, let alone have her go out with him. Roxanne was oblivious to her son's thoughts. She merely assumed they were upset because she could not spend time with them, so she tried her best to console them. While she was comforting her children, Jack entered the mansion with a gift in his hands. "I learned from your mother that you like Lego, so I bought this for you. I hope you like it," he announced. Although Archie and Benny disliked Jack, they had good manners. They turned around upon hearing Jack's voice and accepted the gift. Instead of telling him whether they liked it, they just replied courteously, "Thank you, Mr. Damaris." Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.